episode 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
We did it. I don't know what that means. We're at 4.
No.
That's great.
We have so much more to go.
So much more to go. Well, this is going to be our first Monday release episode, which is our regular schedule.
Yes, because we released 3 episodes when we launched, and iTunes was like, you don't get to pick when it releases. So, cool.
Yeah, so we did it. So things are a little interesting for us today. I am apparently a very old human and have scary sciatica stuff happening. Mm-hmm. So we created some sort of standing desk recording studio situation.
We literally have a table and then an end table on top of that table so the mic can reach our faces.
Yes. And then there's also now a blanket above us because we don't want any, echo from the ceiling.
It's been interesting. And we have a guest on our next episode. So we'll see how this goes too.
We're just trying some new and exciting things right off the bat. We're like, you know what? Episode 4, the first 3 were regular. 4 is going to get crazy. 5, even more crazy. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then 6 is the end.
So here we are. So if it sounds different, that's why. But grab your cold brews because we're going to dive in.
Hey, I'm Derek.
And I'm Noah, and you're listening to Abida,
where we take our current favorite pop culture obsession and enjoy it one nibble at a time.
Yep.
So let's first, as always, just take a quick glance back at the past of what we were just discussing.
Okay.
That's a new one, right?
That's a
new voice.
Yeah.
I think it's the standing. It's just taken my life over. So chapters 11 through 15 is what we covered in episode 3. That was the bite of Midnight Sun for that episode. Mm-hmm. And really what happened in that was our courtship quintet.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of just talking.
1,000 questions.
1,000 questions.
Bella's Tinder profile we did.
Mm-hmm. We know her favorite color, her favorite books, her music, likes and dislikes.
Apparently she only knows Claire de Lune and Linkin Park.
Yeah, that's the only CD she owns because her stepdad gave that to her. Phil gifted her with Linkin Park, and that's it. And that was a lot of it. So, they're kind of like touching base about who they both are. There's a lot of talk about what it means for him to be a vampire. There's a lot of talk about her and her past and who she is. And then we kind of have this moment where we're introduced to this idea of the future being a knot, and that there's kind of all of these strands that come together, and it's very much up to the way Edward does things that will kind of shift the future into what actually happens between him and Bella.
Yeah. Alice says there is a trial that you have to do to get through the knot. And we haven't really figured out what it was, but as a reader, you can kind of guess it's probably the meadow because she keeps seeing Bella dead in Edward's arms, but also keeps seeing her as a vampire, also keeps seeing her not as a vampire, but older. So the future is mysterious. It's subjective. So just keep that in mind.
Yes, it's very to eat or not to eat. That is the question.
Ooh. Yeah.
Shakespeare.
He was a vampire. He had to.
He was.
Yeah.
That's why no one can really trace. They're like, is he real? It's like, yeah, he was real, but he's also still alive.
Yeah, or it was like 17 people that just wrote these plays and
or that.
Anyway.
So, of course, first, we have to give our delightful little spoiler alert because we're going to talk about chapters 16 through 20 now.
Right.
So we invite you to read along with us, or maybe you've read already and you want to listen to see what we think. But of course, just know we're going to be talking about things that happen in the book. So spoilers.
Yeah, we don't want to, spoil it for you if you want to know. So stop listening, go read those chapters, and then come back.
Bam. So chapter 16 is called The Knot.
Okay, that was a very dramatic pause. Finally, The Knot.
What
is it?
Yeah. So Bella and Edward finally have their day out together with matching outfits, a 5-mile hike, and even more questions.
So right off the bat, chapter 16 starts with Sleep Stalking, part 9, maybe 10 or 8.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Like it's getting to the point where like every chapter starting and ending with sleep stalking.
Yeah.
So that's where this chapter starts out with.
Mm-hmm. And there's this moment where, so he leaves her to go get changed. He wants to be like, put together for their day out. And I believe they put on like the same outfit. like
yeah, it's very matching.
it's
like the tones and the colors are the same. Right.
It's like some sort of like white button down with a tan sweater over it. So they're like already there in that couple territory where they're just dressing alike. And also I like how it's like, we have to go on a hike, so I'm going to wear a button down.
Okay, to be fair, he did not tell her what they were doing. And this was probably the most irritating thing to me about this chapter, because she gets pretty. She gets all dressed up. And you know, Edward's a vampire. I guess he can wear whatever he wants. But Bella, she gets nice. And, you know, I assume she doesn't have hiking boots on. And as they're going there, he's like, oh, by the way, it's just 5 miles.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you can't just spring that on somebody.
Rude.
That's the most disturbing thing so far.
And there's kind of like this thought I had of, he's like, I don't want to kill her. So what I'm going to do is bring her to the most remote place I could possibly think of. So it's just us, and I can maybe kill her.
I mean, he really needs to push his limits to see if he can get through this metaphorical knot.
Oh, good call. And it's also interesting, though, just like from Bella's perspective of, like, you know, so she knows he's a vampire now. She knows that he could kill people. And then you're there. First of all, he rudely didn't tell you how to dress.
Right.
And then he's like, we're going on a 5-mile hike. Like, that would make me nervous as a human. Being like, oh, I guess I trust him. And he says he's not going to kill me. But he also wants to take me on a 5-mile hike before this event happens.
Yeah, how Bella is how she's described in her inner monologue in her books, in her perspective, she's very reserved. She's very protective. She's very questioning. She's very standoffish, which goes into her powers later. It's just odd to me that she's just so trusting of this person. She has absolutely no idea about the extent of what he can do, what he is. And I mean, I can't say fully that if I was in her position, I wouldn't be super curious, but that is pushing it. He's pushing himself by taking her somewhere really remote. She's pushing herself by being like, sure, I'll go on this 5-mile hike, even though I can't walk correctly.
Right.
And also you're a vampire, so we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I mean, I guess in the real world, due to online dating, people are always taking these sort of like chances where it's like, okay, I'm going to meet a total stranger.
Yeah, but you should like meet in a public place first. That's just
true. But sometimes people like fly to other places and then they go to remote little houses where nobody else is, and you know, stuff like that. So
it sounds vaguely familiar.
Right? I mean, granted, in this, you know, very hypothetical situation that I'm talking about, no one was a vampire as far as I know. But people take chances.
Right. So, yeah. Chapter 16 was just them getting to the meadow.
Yeah. And so there's, again, more of this, like him asking her questions, dogs or cats, who's your favorite teacher? They talk about her mom a little bit. Again, and I think, again, this kind of talks about her relationship and who she is. She says, Renee just can't stand an anchor. I mean, she already had me, right? One huge life-altering anchor was enough. She wasn't going to volunteer for more. So it's kind of like why they were never really able to put down full roots and things like that. Her mom sort of has this very, like, she's wanderlust is just who her mom is. And
she can't just stay in one place.
Right. And I think that, again, is really a key piece of why Bella is the way that she is. You know, she's quiet, she's serious, she has a very kind of practical future. She makes practical choices. And so that's also kind of interesting, right? Of like, that's who Bella is. That's where she came from. And she's giving her life into an immortal being's hands. So
that can apparently stop a speeding car from crushing her.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what we haven't spoken about yet is the dazzling.
Oh yeah, how she says he dazzles her.
Yeah, whatever. And that's like a vampire power though. It's like they're able to dazzle humans.
Or hypnosis. Yeah, I think it's interesting how it doesn't seem like they know they can do it or that it's really happening, because he seemed a little, what are you talking about? And at first when I interpreted that, I thought it was just her getting those butterflies in her stomach. Like anytime she saw him, she was like, ooh, he cute.
Yeah.
But it just seems that, you know, when they turn into a vampire, they get beautiful. Like everything about them is just beautiful, invites people in.
Yeah.
So it's just, I
yeah, I know. In my head, the way I picture it is like they stare at you and then they just blink their eyes really fast. Dazzle, 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 dazzle. Done.
Right.
Yeah. And so they have all this conversation. They finally get to the meadow, and then Edward notices that, like, he's so scary that, like, all the living things in that, like, immediate area are gone. They can sense this kind of, like, predator about.
Right.
And then...
They're like, that was the guy that ate Ted last week.
Poor Ted.
Yeah,
R.I.P. Ted.
Yeah. I just named one of the animals that he murdered.
Ted the mountain lion, and Bridget the deer.
Oh, no.
Bridget! Because the last line of the knot is, I closed my eyes as I stepped into the sunlight.
Yep.
So then we have chapter 17. This is my confession. Except it's just called Confession. Edward steps into the light and goes full disco ball. Bella is amazed, so he runs away from her. He thinks of killing her, and then he tells her about all the times he wanted to kill her.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, he confessed. He finally confessed.
Yeah.
I just hearing his inner monologue when he's going out into the sunlight, there's a part of me that feels like Stephenie Meyer kind of upped them feeling weird about sparkling in the sunlight. I get it. If you're in the sunlight, people are going to know you're different. Like, why are you sparkling like that?
Welcome to my life.
Right. Right. It is just odd how much he's just scared to be in the sunlight. And I don't know. I feel like she hinted a little bit at when they're in the sun, they don't feel right. So I would attribute that to maybe a nocturnal animal being up in the day and they're just, this isn't right.
I think it goes against all of their natural instincts, right? So there are these apex predators. They need darkness to hunt. They feel most comfortable at twilight when people are still about, but it's dark enough for them to go outside. So their natural urges, right? This like natural instinct they have to hunt is completely taken away by the sunlight and basically ruins any camouflage that they've had.
Right.
So it's even their own safety, their own self preservation.
Right.
So
I'm always just curious why she made them sparkle. It's odd to me. I know there's a lot of the story that takes place in daylight, so I could understand that she didn't want them to burst into flames like most of the lore says they do. Yeah. But it's an interesting take on it. They just sparkle and she attributes them to like marble and granite and steel, so it's very odd. It's cool, but it's odd.
Yeah, I mean, like, they're basically like that sort of gaudy but sort of beautiful marble that some people get in their kitchens that has, like, flecks of metal in it.
Right.
So it's, like, high quality, but also, like, a little much.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think it was kind of just, like, her answer to why they can't go out in sunlight.
Right.
And it just, I guess there'd be no cast if they burst into flames. It would just be called Bella, that girl.
She saw that cute boy. Yeah. Burst into flame.
End of Twilight.
It would be called Combustion.
Oh.
I did like, there was a part. So as soon as he steps into the sunlight and he's shining like a disco ball, like you so aptly said, and she freaked out. Or she was like, oh, Edward. Right. And he said, mirrored in her eyes, what I resembled most was a man on fire. Well, yeah. Because if you're sparkling that much and you look like you're going to explode, a reasonable person, even though vampires shouldn't exist, but they do in this universe, you would think that you're on fire because I would assume that you would burst into flames when so.
and it probably also didn't help that when he stepped into the sunlight, he was like, Bella, he wasn't being very calm about it.
Right.
He was being a total maniac.
Right.
And then that's what happens. So he comes into the sunlight. She's like, oh, like Edward, oh my God. And then he's like, ah! And he like runs away from her. He runs away from her and he has like all these flashes of things that happened, times he wanted to kill her, things she must be thinking. And like he kind of does this like weird thing where he's like doing like, it's like a beautiful mind math where he's like, there are 800 million thousand insects and there are like 1,400 birds. Right. And it's like I don't know if he's like trying to calm himself down or trying to think of other things.
He's been with her alone or in close proximity before. And I think the anxiety and the buildup to this this trial they have to go to and seeing these visions of him killing her, I think it's just making him freak out.
Yeah.
So it's not I don't think it's necessarily maybe his vampire urges, but it's more, I'm going to kill her. Like, I've seen it, I'm going to kill her. And that's when he does the whole, like, I'm going to count every single insect here. I'm going to count all this. And he tells her to just, like, don't say anything. Just be quiet.
Yeah.
So he's just really trying to focus and concentrate. So I think it's odd. He could be in a car with her, that close to her scent, but as soon as he's out in the sunlight, he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
yeah,
you need to, like, shut up.
But I think you bring up a good point about the knot in this situation, because this is the scene that he's been seeing over and over again through Alice's mind.
Right.
This is the moment for him. This is that trial that's saying, this is when you either continue on or you end it right now. And so maybe that's where the freak out comes in, and he needed to get away from her because he was so nervous that he would kill her.
Yeah, and there's this awkward moment in this where when he tells her to be quiet, be calm, like, I'm just trying to, like, focus, or however he says it, there's moments where it's funny where she's like, did you say something? And he's like, no, I'm just singing to myself. And it's like, she's trying to get you to talk.
Right.
Like, can you just, like, either kiss her already, talk to her? Because as a reader reading this and reading his inner thoughts, it's very long. Mm-hmm. And it seems like more time has passed than there actually is, because he's thinking of all the insects. He's thinking about Carlisle. He's thinking about when he used to murder people as Batman. Like, so, like, there's a lot going on in this. And she keeps, every time he might mutter something or do something, she's like, did you say something?
Yeah.
Like, can we talk now? Like,
I kind of, like, have this idea of her across the meadow, and she's like, Edward, you okay? And he's like, fine. Okay, I'm gonna just sit here for a little. She's just, like, watching him from across the field.
He's just pacing in a circle, saying insect names.
Grasshopper. Right. And then there's this moment when he is like, oh, wait, it's gonna be fine.
Yeah, he has this weird. So the inner monster thing comes back. It hasn't been around in a few chapters, and he realizes, he's like, I am the inner monster. It was me the whole time. I can conquer this. That is the inner goddess moment from 50 Shades of Grey.
Yes, take control of that monster. Nobody tells you who you are but you, boo. Right. And then he says, Bella and I would leave this place hand in hand, and my life would finally begin.
Yeah, that's super sweet.
Yeah.
This chapter did have a lot of sweet moments in it.
And then they're like, okay, he's like, I'm not going to kill you. We can come together now. He holds her. He smells her hair. He listens to her heart, and he feels like, okay, I could be free with my feelings for her now. And then he's like, you want to go for a ride? And she's like, what? He's like, let me show you how I usually go down this mountain. And he's like, going to take her on a really fast vampire run. And there's this one moment where he says, I think I'm going to go down this way because it's better than to jostle her with a more vertical path. And I just pictured her like, like, just like him blasting down this mountain, and her just being like, her face, like, you hear like her, like her cheeks just like going crazy. Yeah. And then so he brings her down the mountain. He carries her like a backpack, basically. Mm-hmm. And then she almost barfs.
Yeah, well, she like faints almost.
Yeah.
And she's, I forgot to breathe or something like that. Like, she couldn't breathe and she should have closed her eyes. I was like, that wasn't a good idea.
He's like, put your head between your legs. She's like, Nothing says romance like finally having your future together than starting it with a barf moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cute.
So cute. Mm-hmm. Totes cute. And then they have their first kiss.
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a little confused in what happened.
Yeah. And then he says, though I thought I was prepared, I was not entirely ready for the combustion.
See, I was right. It could have been called combustion.
Yes. I just kind of, I don't know why, but I just pictured his like pants exploding or something like that.
Yeah.
So then we get into the next chapter. So we have chapter 18, Mind Over Matter. The star-crossed pair drive back to the Swan residence. On the way, Bella learns the origins of the second lives of the Cullen clan. Edward spends the night with her permission, finally.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we have another one of these like car rides home where they talk about everything about themselves. So he kind of reveals more about himself. He talks about how Carlisle made him a vampire, why he did.
Yeah, his parents were already dead. It was so sad.
So yeah, his parents had died of the flu, the pandemic, and he was just a young guy. And then so Carlisle kind of brought him into being a vampire to save him. So he was the first in Carlisle's family. And then soon after that, Carlisle found Esme. And it's interesting. This is where we kind of learn a bit about like why they became vampires, like why they all had to like make this choice to become vampires.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was ever mentioned in the series, but you find out that the way Esme was dying was she fell from a cliff.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, right? Because in a prior chapter, we're told that it was sort of like a Renesmee Jacob thing where like she was a little girl and she fell in love with Carlisle.
Yeah, because he was a doctor.
Right. And then as she grew older, but then it's literally one line. He says, I was the first in Carlisle's family, though he found Esme soon after she fell from a cliff.
Right.
That's all he says, though.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really want to know more why. Why did she throw herself? Did she accidentally fall? Did somebody throw her? That's not something you can just literally leave a cliffhanger about. And like not elaborate on. So we'll see maybe later if it gets into it.
Yeah. Yeah, because she's been sort of doing that, right? She's been Stephanie Meyer's been like dropping these like little lines that are going to come up later. And so this is the stuff that I've always wanted out of this book.
This is why I'm reading.
Exactly.
Right.
I want to know like who they are. It's like we only know about them in that particular time period of meeting Bella and all that. I want to take a step back, and that's what we get. So it's really exciting. So we learn about Emmet. And so Rosalie found him. And so this is sort of a callback to an earlier chapter, right? Where he was being mauled by a bear.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like, oh, we saw him fighting bears. He likes to fight bears. It's almost like he has this vengeance thing for bears.
Right. He's like, I'm going to kill every single bear.
That's right.
That is my like go-to meal.
I'm going to eat them.
Right.
And he likes to play with them. It's almost like this thing of like, ha, you can't destroy me now.
Right.
Look at me.
I'm also really liking, so in this chapter, you find out, like you said, the Cullens, how they got there and how they became a family. But it's also interesting the number or the when they came in. So it was Edward, then Esme, then Rosalie, which for some reason I assumed she was right before Jasper and Alice. So you find out that Rosalie was brought in and was brought in for a reason.
That's right. She was supposed to be Edward's
mate,
the pair.
Yeah.
And it was not so.
No, Edward was like, nah.
And that's why she has like this big chip on her shoulder, right? It was kind of like she was brought in for this very specific reason. And they were like, oh, actually, I don't like it.
No thanks.
No thanks.
Next.
So then she finds Emmet. She carries his bloody corpse back to Carlisle. And she's like, you have to help him. And he's like, I think he's too far gone.
Yeah, she's like, I don't mean that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
I think Edward had to say like, no, save him.
Right.
And then he was like, oh, you want me to bite him?
Yeah, that was a big deal for her because she was still relatively new as being a vampire. And for her to not eat this bloody corpse of a giant man, Emmet, while she runs back to wherever they were living.
Yeah.
It's pretty good on her part.
Yeah. And I also really like this initial Rosalie that we get. She was like very much a moody teenager when they first made her a vampire. She's like, I don't like it. I don't want to do this. You guys suck. And of course, Edward said like, she really actually didn't say that much of it out loud, but because he could read her thoughts, she was just like, so miserable.
Yeah. He couldn't, it was hard for him to tolerate it. And I think he said something about Esme was kind of at her wit's end, and he said, well, she's lucky she couldn't hear all the other stuff she was saying.
Right.
I feel bad for Edward sometimes.
Yeah. And then after that, we find out about Alice and Jasper.
Do we find out about Alice, though?
No, we don't. But I thought this was really interesting. So Alice just woke up a vampire.
Yeah.
She doesn't remember her past. And so I think this is interesting, right? So she doesn't know anything about her past. She doesn't know anything about her human life because Alice only looks to the future.
Right. And she sees, Carlisle? She sees the Cullens.
Yeah.
And Jasper.
Yeah.
And she realizes what her name is.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That is the most, like, when I read that, I was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding? Because Alice is one of my favorite characters. And as soon as I started seeing them going into the origin, I was like, no, you better write another book about what happened with Alice. Like,
maybe that's what we'll get. Maybe we'll get the Alice years.
It's too mysterious for her not to say. You know what I mean? So if this was going to be the only book she ever wrote, unless this was going to be one of the biggest mysteries in the Twilight universe, I would think that she's either planning on writing it or she would just mic drop and be like, sorry, I know you guys wanted to know, but peace.
She just is who she is.
Right.
But I do enjoy the symbolism of it, that her power is that she sees the future, so she can't see her own past. Right. It's kind of like this double-edged sword.
Yeah, it's crazy. I want to know what happened. And for the person who ever turned her to just leave her. She just woke up.
Yeah.
She's like, I guess I'm a vampire now.
She's lucky she has that power to be able to see the future, because otherwise how would you even know what was going on?
You wouldn't. Yeah.
You'd just be a hot mess.
Yeah.
Hot, bloody mess, just furious and eating humans and being like, I don't know what's happening.
I just love her, since she can see the future and she started to realize how set in stone they were, depending on her decisions or the subjectivity of it, that she knew she needed to find Jasper and she needed to find the Cullens. Yeah. And that's all she did. It's like she just went out and did it right away.
Yeah. And he says that Alice and Jasper are rare in the sense that they both had the conscience to not want to eat people, to not want to attack people. Like, it's like he had to be taught that by Carlisle. Right. And then we learned that he even had these years where he couldn't do that anymore. He needed to go out.
I loved reading about that. Yeah. That was super interesting. That added another layer to Edward that I really, really appreciated.
But he had to be taught that. Right. He had to be taught to be this sort of quote-unquote vegetarian. Whereas Alice and Jasper, there was just this piece of them that knew that it was wrong. And I wonder if it relates to their powers where, she can see the future, so she kind of knows. And maybe Jasper, because he can feel things so strongly, to eat other humans is too painful.
Oh, for sure. That's actually a good point. And I feel like there's a scene later on where he craves the good energy. He craves the good emotions. He wants to linger in them. He wants to amplify them. So I wouldn't imagine... And I could see it being hard for Edward too, like hearing all of the thoughts of when you're trying to kill somebody. Yeah, I see that as I would be vegetarian too. Yeah. I mean, maybe he can feel animals too. I don't know. Just
There's also this sort of thought that I was playing around with in this book of fate versus free will. So he says things like, the future isn't set in stone, things change. And then he goes on to say about them being vegetarians, but you see, just because we've been dealt a certain hand, it doesn't mean that we can't choose to rise above, to conquer the boundaries of a destiny that none of us wanted, to try to retain whatever essential humanity we can. So there's sort of this interesting thought, right, of they very much sort of look at Alice's premonitions as they're like, that's something that very likely can happen.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that fate point to it. But then there's also this thought of, but maybe I could do something to change it.
And that's what I love about Alice, though. Because if it's something that they don't like, or especially Edward saying killing Bella, and she can keep honing in on that vision. And as he's dealing with his stuff, she's like, stay like that. Think like that. Be in that mindset because this is good. And he can, with his powers, see what she's seeing also. So I really like that Alice is always looking out for them. Yeah. And it's interesting because you find out too that she's more sensitive to vampires than she is to humans. So that's pretty interesting. And I don't know if that has to do with her origin. Maybe. So who knows?
And in my head, so it's funny reading this. So then he goes into their powers after he talks about their pasts. And we had sort of talked about this. And this was like a theory that we had of like, you sort of have something as a human that relates to something. And then once that venom gets into you, it becomes a power. Right. So he says that Carlisle thinks that I must have already been very sensitive to the thoughts of those around me. Jasper was actually very charismatic. Right. So he was like, he could like sweet talk people. He can get people to come on his side. And now that has gone to emotions. And Emmet was just really strong and Rose had her beauty. And in my mind, he also then talks about them as like their roles in almost like an army. Right. So it's like, it feels very much to me like sort of like an RPG or something like that. Like
you need the healer, the tank,
yes,
the support.
Exactly, exactly. So they're like this team that's built. Who's the brute strength? Who's the leader? Who's the healer? Who's the intelligence? You know, it's like very Final Fantasy VII. It's very Sailor Moon. You know, I see like Alice's Sailor Mercury on her little computer. Beep, 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 beep. You have an 80% chance of killing her. You know, her weakness is this. And it's like, it's very interesting to kind of see how he thinks of all of them with their powers and this sort of Cullen team that they've created.
It is a part of them. It makes them who they are, and it cements them in that place in the family.
Yeah.
It is really cool. There is a point, too, in this chapter where he finally confesses fully about stalking her. And he's like, what else is there to do at night? Oh, I don't know. What else have you been doing for the last 100 years at night?
Go whittle her something beautiful.
Create more music.
No one sleeps in the house. It's okay. They don't mind. Yeah. It's like, give me a break.
Yeah, it's very odd because he also says, and this is where I think it's just more of a plot device than an actual realistic view of what would have happened. If I would have known that somebody was stalking me, be that if I liked them or not, it would have made me feel really awkward and really, you know, my privacy would have been completely like, why would you do that? He tells her almost every night, I've been there. And the only thing she cares about is, what did you hear?
Right.
It's like, what? He's been in your house every night.
He's been staring at you.
It is odd because she's just more concerned with, did I say something embarrassing? Not, oh, you've been a creep this whole time.
Yeah. Did I fart uncontrollably? Like,
also, she might just be scared to get mad at him because she's like, well, he's been in my house this whole time, and he's obviously a murderer, so...
Yeah, so there's that. And so this kind of happens within this chapter. So they drive back to the Swan residence. They go inside. She has a bite to eat, but as she's heating up her food, they hear Charlie's coming from his fishing trip. So Edward runs up the stairs. He eavesdrops on them the entire time having their conversation. She finally comes up. She's like, can I have a second to be human? And like she goes and takes a shower and all this stuff.
I always, every time she said that, 'cause she said that a few times, I was like, she has to poop.
Yeah, 100%.
That's just the first thing that came to my mind, because it was an odd thing to say just to say, I got to go take a shower.
Yeah.
But I mean, whatever, it's cute, I guess.
I mean, I guess you're not going to just go to the guy that you're falling in love with and be like, I got to dump.
No. Touche. They also start talking about human vampire sex.
Yes!
And I don't remember this from the first one, because I remember Stephanie Meyer being very much like, this isn't about sex. Mm-hmm. And that was like one of the big things about Breaking Dawn, because sex was had and talked about. Right. Yeah. And look how that turned out. But yeah, they start talking about it, and he pretty much tells her like, nah, I'm too crazy for you, too rough, you're too fragile, we can't do it, it's not in the cards for us.
Yeah.
And I could just feel her be like, but like, why?
Oh, then fuck my needs. Right?
Yes.
Oh. Yeah, he says, I could kill you quite easily, Bella, simply by accident. I reached up carefully to lay my hand against her cheek. If I was too hasty, if for 1 second I wasn't paying enough attention, I could reach out, meaning to touch your face, and crush your skull by mistake.
It's hot.
Right? It's so like, hot. Light the candles, set the music, put on the nice pajamas, and crush her skull.
Oh, God, just like the Mountain did in Game of Thrones. Just do it. Just do it.
Right in the peepers. Ka-chow! I love your beautiful TIs. Blam!
Now it's a soup.
Delicious.
Yeah, it is awkward, and they talk for a little bit. They kind of caress each other, kiss like one more time. Bella gets too hasty with her kisses because you can't open your mouth, apparently. And she falls asleep. Right. And in her sleep, she says a full sentence. Edward, I love you. I'm like, damn, you talk really well in your sleep. I don't have that ability, but she does.
I mean, listen, I am all about emotional expression.
Right.
Okay. But you two have known each other
right.
for like
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
2
but
months,
like
maybe.
For like the first half of it, you weren't even talking to each other.
Yeah, it did seem
hasty.
Right.
So yeah, that's how it ends. He's watching her sleep, and she says she loves him.
Yeah, and then he leaves because he wants to change and be all fresh for when she wakes up.
And that's chapter 19, Home. An early heart-to-heart with Rosalie, then some deep conversation over off-brand Cheerios, followed by a visit to the in-laws.
Oh, I was super excited for this because I really wanted to know during when Bella first met the Cullens what they were all thinking. And since we're in Edward's head, we can finally hear this.
Yeah, so she's still sleeping. He gets up. He's like, let me freshen up.
And also tell my family that this sweet meal is going to be coming over.
Delicious.
Right.
Isabella Swan. So he is kind of like going there, and on the way, he's like, I know Alice is going to be fine, and I know she's going to get Jasper to be fine. I know that my parents are going to be cool. He's like, Emmet, maybe if I promised him something he wanted, a wrestling match or a football game, he would be cool.
Cute.
He's like, Rosalie is the one that I really have to
because she's been the foil for them really this whole time. Yeah. Everybody's kind of rooting for them. Yeah. But Rosalie is like, nah, and Jasper's been teetering a bit.
Yeah. And so he gets to the house, he gets changed, he then finds Rosalie and they go on a walk together. And so we kind of learned that although there's sort of like this this jealousy of this past that they were supposed to have and everything, there's also another reason, right? So this harkens back to them sort of hating being vampires. And she says to him, I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound so cruel. I just can't. I can't watch her do this. She's got a chance for everything, Edward. Rosalie whispered, her whole body rigid with intensity, a whole life of possibilities ahead of her, and she's going to waste it all. Everything I lost, I can't bear to watch it.
That brings me to, I'm curious what Rosalie is specifically talking about. I get the general idea that, she's human. She can literally do whatever she wants. She can get married. She can have kids. She can do this. I'm just curious, for Rosalie, is that a family? Is that being able to really go out in the sun, do all these type of things? Or is it very more hyper-focused? Because with her past and what we know with her rapists and everything, was it she wanted a family, and seeing how she dealt with Bella when she was pregnant, she really became maternal. So I'm curious if it's more the maternal side that she couldn't have this big family and the marriage and everything like that. But it really made me feel for Rosalie, and I think that was the point of this, especially this chapter, to really dig into why Rosalie hated Bella for the first 3 books, pretty much. Right.
And I think that you're very much in the right direction with your thought process there. I think that for the Cullen kids, they didn't have a choice to live their lives. They were stolen in some way, whether it's by an attack of some sort or a sickness. And for Rosalie, that choice was taken away from her. So to see someone kind of voluntarily walking into this situation, it's probably infuriating.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially with the Cullens, because like you said, they all really had no choice. And I think that goes into Carlisle's decisions and how hard it was for him to do it. But yeah, it was interesting to see what Rosalie was thinking. But Edward was pretty much like, well, she's coming today. And she's like, nah, I need more time. You can't. I'll try. Yeah. I will try to be cool with Bella, but not yet. Which is respectful. I think it's very respectful.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think we were talking about how in the Twilight series, a lot of these characters, even the kids at school, were these very baseline caricatures of one,
archetype
of character. Right. And I think that we sort of had that with the Cullen clan. But this again is finally giving us that depth, and I like seeing that, right? So for us as readers, it was Rosalie's a bitch,
right?
She's a bitch, she's pretty, that's it. But it's no, there's something underneath there that,
especially in the first time around with Bella's perspective, you didn't really get to get that.
Yeah, it was just she's mean,
right? Even Edward was just she's just pretty, she's kind of a bitch or whatever. But now you're really starting to see her motivations really early on, which is really neat to see. I like it.
And I almost wonder if over time Stephanie Meyer sort of just had this time to really ruminate about these characters and see what they're in my theater minor, a character has a spine, right? And it's their main driving force of what drives them through every action.
Right.
So now we're getting to see their what makes them them.
Mhm.
And I think that's really great.
Yeah. Yep.
So he goes and has this conversation with Rosalie, and then he goes back to the Swan residence. He sits in his chair. Bella wakes up, and she's like, "Oh, Edward, there you are!"
Right.
And she like leaps into his arms, and she says, "I love you" to him.
Again.
And then they have to get ready to go. So then they go downstairs. She has like this off-brand Cheerios or whatever, and then there's like this sort of weird moment where they're like, he's like holding her and they're kissing, and then she like faints.
Yeah, because she forgot to breathe.
In my mind, he's just crushing her head into his chest so hard that she cannot breathe, and then she drops.
It's like Luther holding Vanya from Umbrella Academy
Yes.
season 1.
Yes.
She's just like, "Oh, hi," and she's like, "I can't breathe." Stop. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Mhm.
So we have that sort of weird moment, and then it's hilarious because it's like they're talking about like going to meet someone, and right, there's always that moment of like, "Oh my God, I'm meeting my significant other's family, and I'm so nervous." And he's like, "So you're telling me that you're not nervous because we're vampires. You're just nervous because they're my parents." And she's like, "Yeah."
Something's wrong. It's all those contusions. I can't. Like, she just there's no reasonable way that she wouldn't slightly be nervous, and she probably was. I can't remember exactly her inner monologue during this point in Twilight, but it is funny that every single time he's like, "Why are you not scared of vampires?"
Yeah.
It's like, well, because she's weird.
Okay.
She's eclectic.
Why don't you just be happy that she's not scared of vampires? She's on your side.
Yeah, and I love so when she first gets into the house, of course, Esme and Carlisle are there to welcome them.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Esme every single time that Bella says something super polite. She's like, "Oh my God, I love her. She's perfect. She's the best." I'm like, "Oh, I love Esme's so nice.
Yeah.
She's so supportive every single time. I love her. She never changes."
If you think about it, she's been watching, her son just mope about for, almost a century.
Right.
And she's like, "Yay! He's finally going to be happy."
Right. Finally.
Finally.
Gonna be happy.
These damn kids.
That's why her and Carlisle like leave the house to go talk, because they're like, "I can't. Edward is super depressing.
Yeah.
And he needs to get some."
Hi, I'm fine.
I can hear all thoughts.
And then you have Rosalie stomping around the place. I hate it here. What a mess.
Yep.
What a mess. So everybody, so the parents come and say hi. Jasper and Alice say hi. Emmet says hi. Rosalie doesn't.
Right.
So she kind of said that to him. I'm probably not going to be able to come there.
Emmett's trying to talk her down.
Yeah, and it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So then they leave, and so then he and Bella sit at the piano.
Cute.
He plays the lullaby for her.
Cute.
She cries, and then
It's so weird.
he tenderly reaches over and just swipes the crystalline tear from her face, places it on his tongue, and swallows.
Okay. And then his reasoning is that maybe since he can't digest anything other than blood, that a part of her will be inside of him forever. It's sweet if you thought that in your head, but to do the action and that she has no reaction to what he just did is a little odd.
I'm gonna lick your face. It's like,
Your
what?
eyeball. I'm just gonna lick your eyeball. Yeah, this book is filled, and I think that just comes with Twilight, with very odd things, very odd gestures, very odd ways to do things because they're vampires, I guess. But there's sweet things in it. Like, it has a sweet message. It's just the action is a little weird.
Yeah, the execution of the sweetness
Right.
is a little roundabout.
Mm-hmm.
There is an interesting thing here, though. It's kind of like a drop, and I'm wondering if it's a drop of like a hint of James
Mm-hmm.
and them to come. He says,
Right.
yes, well, they aren't like us, of course, in their hunting habits, I mean. They probably won't come into town at all, but I'm certainly not going to let you out of my sight till they're gone.
Definitely James and Laurent and Victoria.
Yeah. So there's that sense that they know someone's around, but I don't think they're going to come.
Mm-hmm.
But we know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Before we get to chapter 20, there is this part. So he starts talking about Carlisle and his history and how he celebrated his 300-somethingth birthday. So we find out how old he is.
Yeah.
And then we also get a glimpse, a tiny bit, and he tells her how he was in the Volturi and how he led hunts for, well, before he got turned into a vampire, I'm sorry. He led hunts for witches, werewolves, ... and vampires. So I just want to correct his title real quick. So I'm going to revise.
Huh?
It's Vampire Daddy Monster Hunter Dr. Carlisle Cullen. He was a badass before he became a vampire.
Heck yeah. And so like there's like this whole history, right, of his father like trying to like rid the world of sin, and so he becomes part of these clans. And that brings us into chapter 20, which is titled Carlisle. Yay! A visit to Vampire Daddy Monster Hunter Doctor's home office and a glimpse into both his and Edward's beginnings, aka the Cullen clan commencement.
This was my favorite chapter of the entire series so far.
Dabbing.
Yeah, it was. I love, because like we said, and I'm sure why most people are reading this, we want to know more about these vampires, more about them before Bella came into the picture. And that's why they go to Carlisle, because Edward's like, yeah, let him tell you.
Yeah.
But for some reason, Carlisle's like, I'm sorry, I really can't. I gotta go. I got a doctor emergency. So it was really awkward.
Bella, we've so been looking forward to meeting you. I gotta go. This is so weird.
Right. Yeah, so we find out that Carlisle was a monster hunter prior to becoming a vampire. We find out how he got turned into a vampire, which is super cool. He didn't necessarily get bitten.
It was like in a battle.
Right. And so there was a big crowd that was corralling this vampire, and he got bit, I believe, in the hand and the bicep.
Yeah.
Or slashed and bit.
Yeah,
one of the
slashed
two.
in the hand, bit in the bicep.
Right. And so that's when we also find out about how the venom works. So his transition was very long, very painful, because I guess the bites and the venom were so far from the heart and the circulatory system that it just took forever. So you feel bad for Carlisle, because he had this whole mindset of like the Christian Crusades where they killed anybody that wasn't Christian, and then he's turning into the monster that he was hunting, and then he's battling with, I shouldn't kill people. How do I do this? So he's just wandering around, hungry, mopey.
So sad.
Yeah.
Well, he even says he tried to commit suicide.
Right, many times. Try to drown himself, try to burn himself, try to fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
Esme did. She succeeded, but,
like BV, before vampire.
There you go. Right.
So, but there's also this thing where he says, so that's how Carlisle was changed into a vampire. So that's the only way he knew how to change people into vampires. Right. So when I was really sick, he did the same exact thing to me. So my process of turning into a vampire was incredibly painful and really long and drawn out.
Because he bit him in the same places.
Yeah.
He bit him in the bicep and he bit him in the hand or something like that.
On the hand, on the bicep. And then he's like, now writhe in pain.
Yeah. It was interesting. And I like how he later found out, just keep injecting more venom and do it quickly. Yeah. So they turn faster.
Totally.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
It's so crazy. And then we get to Carlisle's gallery of paintings.
Yes.
So it seems like he almost has a painting representing every sort of
50
years of his life.
Decade, yeah.
It's almost like his souvenir, and sometimes important moments of Carlisle Cullen. And he some of them are gifted to him, and he's like this really isn't their style. It's sort of gaudy and disgusting, but he had to keep it. It was a gift.
Right.
And so we kind of see these different moments of who Carlisle was and who he was with. And there's this one of him that's it was meant to be a portrayal of the final judgment, but half the thrashing figures seem to be involved in some kind of orgy, the other half in a violent, bloody combat. But there's also a little portrait of Carlisle in the midst of this madness.
Right.
So he was around during this time. And then we have this thing that says, Solimena was greatly inspired by Carlisle's friends. He often painted them as gods, Arrow, Marcus, and Caius.
Name drop.
So our Volturi friends. So it's really cool. He's taking Bella through Carlisle's life through these paintings. And you see he was in London, then he swims to France, then he goes to Italy, and it's all these different pieces of his life.
And you also find out more about Edward through these 5 chapters and what he did when he left Carlisle and Esme when he decided to be a rebellious little brat. and he literally became a vampire Batman.
Yeah.
Because he would prey on people that were committing atrocious crimes.
Yeah, so Edward, his whole thing is that he's only going to punish the guilty, people who are going to hurt other people. And this one man is like the one person out of all the people that he's ever killed that always sticks out in his mind.
Right.
So I think it was something like, it was in the 1930s. It was during the Great Depression when people were desperate. And this man was like, had this thing of like, I'm not going to do this. And then he's going to do this. And, you know, he goes to kidnap this little girl. And then Edward brings him up to the roof of this apartment building. And when this guy's like, thank you, pretty much, you freed me.
Yeah, Edward says, I realized that I had saved the child from him, and he was relieved. Not hardened like the others, not cold and sure. So that was a really interesting way to depict Edward's crusades and how that one moment sticks out. Because one, it paints a really interesting picture of Edward and what he did, and it also paints his thought process behind it. So it was really interesting to really get more into that.
Right.
And it sounds scary. Like, I want a whole book on that. I want Vigilante Edward.
Yes.
Like, it just sounds fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was really cool. And I think it's really interesting that as a character, he still, even though he knew he had to go out there and he wanted to drink human blood, he had to have a reason to kill those people. And so that's what we get to see. And that chapter really gives us a lot of background into who both Carlisle and Edward are as the first two members of the Cullen clan.
Right.
And then we come to the end of the chapter and we have this line. Alice says there's going to be a real storm tonight. Yes. And Emmet wants to play ball. Woo! Are you game?
And I like how he's like, you're not going to play, Bella. We're going to play and you're going to watch. Yep.
She don't need an umbrella.
Nope.
It's just going to be real loud and thundery. And there's going to be some home runs.
And some very high-legged pitches.
Pitches, yeah.
From Alice, yep.
That's right. She does everything with a little bit of flair.
Yep.
It's that pixie cut. It's that pixie cut. It drives everything about her. Does their hair grow?
See, so I just... So reading fantasy a lot, there's two ways that authors like to do it, like to do their universes. So it seems like Harry Potter's very soft magic, where it can change, you know, there's really no need for explanation, just anything can happen. So I really feel like Stephanie did both, where she's like, this is kind of how it is. I'm not really going to explain it. You might find out, you might not. This is how their powers work. But the further you get into the universe, you see how crazy some of the powers can get. And it's just odd. So I don't think she ever intends to really explain it unless she does like a Carlisle book where they're in the Volturi. And, you know, so it's interesting that she went both routes.
And I think that we have to kind of be okay with that, right? Because she's creating a world. There's a young adult author named Rainbow Rowell, and she wrote this book called Carry On, and it's like this fantasy series. And I heard her speak once, and it was the first time she ever wrote a fantasy, and she was panicking because she's going, how big is a dragon? How long is its tail? What is its wingspan? And then she was like doing research. In the middle of her research, she was like, wait a minute. Dragons aren't real. I can make this whatever I want.
Like, you're literally the god and creator
Exactly.
of that world.
Exactly.
Right,
and so all these things about sparkly vampires and does their hair grow and their venom and she has the right to craft whatever those rules are.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like where we have to just take a moment, take a step back and be like, okay, those are just her vampires. And so maybe their hair grows, maybe it doesn't.
I'm going to say maybe. Who knows?
Okay.
Like, they could like force it to grow. Like, that's also a vampire power that they could.
Yeah.
Also, I did want to point out before we get to Edwards that why is there no bearded or like hairy vampires?
Agreed.
There's werewolves, but even in the movie depiction, they're also not hairy.
Right.
They're
always, I would be screwed. I have no head hair and then hair everywhere else. So when you're a vampire, does your hair just fall out?
That's why I'm thinking that they can grow it on command. They're like, no, we all have to be like perfect slabs of marble.
Yeah.
So,
that's the story that I want. I want the
lumber vamp.
Yeah, I want the lumber vamp. I want the hairy vampire that lives in the mountains of Canada or something like that.
That's where they are. Canada.
That's
where the hairy vampires.
It's cold. Although they don't feel cold. I don't know. I don't know. Everyone stop yelling.
Maybe because they're always cold, their body doesn't need
Oh,
air to
that
keep them
makes
warm.
sense.
There we go. We solved it. You're
Yeah.
welcome, Stephanie.
So if I were a vampire, I would just wake up in a pile of hair.
Oh. Oh, God. All right. Edward's time?
It's time for Edwards. So let's get into our 5 SAT vocabulary Edwards today. Our first word is allay.
L.A.?
Allay.
Olay?
Allah. Yeah. It's A-L-L-A-Y.
Oh.
It's a verb.
Mm.
To subdue or reduce in intensity or severity. To make quiet.
Ooh.
That's a good one.
That is a good
right?
one. I like it.
Next is ire. Noun. Intense and usually openly displayed anger.
Mm.
Right, so that's everyone.
Irate?
Irate.
Mm.
Okay, root words.
Mm.
They're called root words. Next one is languorously. This is an adjective. Producing or tending to produce languor, which is a weakness or weariness of body or mind. So this is my problem. Whenever I'm looking this up on Merriam-Webster, if they're like a version of a word, instead of just like telling you what the definition is, they're just like, it's this sort of thing of that word.
Right, and the word they're saying it's of is even more confusing.
Right.
So I have to look up that word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ugh. The next one is vertiginous.
Mm.
It's an adjective characterized by or suffering from vertigo or dizziness.
Bella.
Bella, right. Definitely when she was going to...
Yep.
Oh, I thought it was when she was barfing on the mountain.
Both times.
And our last Edward is portended. Verb, to give an omen or anticipatory sign.
Alice.
Alice.
Yep.
It's got to be Alice for sure.
I've never heard these words actually used outside of literature, so it's interesting to hear them out loud because I've pronounced all of them wrong in my head.
I always do a little, you can click on this and like hear what it sounds like to make sure I know what I'm talking about, but I think it still probably gets lost in translation from when I listen to it to when I'm delivering Edwards.
Yep, there you go.
So that was A Bite of Midnight Sun, chapters 16 through 20.
Mm-hmm. And chapters 21 to 25, we're going to have one of our very dear friends and a special guest, Melissa, on to talk about it because she's probably the #1 Twilight fan that won't really tell you about it until you mention Twilight.
Yeah, she went in deep back in the day. And so I'm hoping that you all get to experience what I went through when we were in our early 20s, seeing the love and obsession that she had for Twilight. All right. So thanks so much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to A Bite of, artwork and editing by our own Noah. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at A Bite of Pod and on Facebook at A Bite of. If you have questions, recommendations, or just want to say hi, you can email us at abiteofpod@gmail.com. You can find us on all podcast platforms. Please be sure to rate and review to spread the word. Hope you join us next time on A Bite of. Bye.